This conference will now be recorded.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So I apologize, everybody. I was having some problems here. I'm still not completely figured out. My dog's barking in the background. So if you hear any muffled noises, it could be either one of us. I'm not really sure. With that said, it is 4 o'clock, 4:02. Let's go ahead and call this meeting. Hold on. We'll shut him out for a moment. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Tonight is August 3rd, the August meeting of the Transportation and Mobility Commission. I would like to welcome everybody. I see a lot of unfamiliar faces on here in front of me this week. So welcome or welcome back if it's just been a while. With that said, Julie, if you would be so kind to take roll, we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, Commissioner Freyer,
Here.
Commissioner Hardy, looks like you're here, but I think you were muted.
Here.
Thanks. Commissioner Herman, Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Payne,
Present.
Commissioner Raya, Commissioner Ramos,
Here.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Here.
Commissioner Thana, Commissioner Valenta, and Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Is that everybody?
That's everyone.
Perfect. Thank you. Julie, I appreciate you sending out the July minutes earlier this week, end of last week, I believe. Has everyone here had an opportunity to review those July minutes? Has anyone not had an opportunity? Before we call those meetings and we vote on whether to bring those in, if somebody would prepare to make a motion on that, please. I would like to thank the city for the progression of the time slots. I think that's going to be able to coordinate with the recordings, as previously requested. I think that's a real bonus, and it was definitely a pleasure to see those included in this month's minutes. So with that said, does anybody wish to move forward with this? Everybody's on silence.
Williams so moves.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Please identify.
Freyer, Commissioner Freyer.
Thank you, Commissioner Freya, for a second. So the vote is to accept the adoption of the July minutes as written. Lee?
Commissioner Hardy,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Chair Payne,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramos,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
and Commissioner Freyer.
Yes.
Is everyone? Thank you.
I would note that Commissioner Thana has arrived.
Thank you. I was just going to clarify that. I don't believe you called her name for the vote as well.
Okay, Commissioner Thana, the motion is to approve the July minutes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And I think it would be safe to say, let the record reflect her as being in attendance for tonight's meeting as well.
Noted.
Thank you. With that said, Julie, if you would be kind enough to put up the, I apologize. I don't have the preamble in front of me. If you have a copy of that, I'd be happy to read that now, or we can wait till.
Jennifer, do you know where that is saved? I don't know that I have it on hand.
Yeah, let me find it. Do you just want me to send it to you?
I'll make you a presenter. You can share your screen.
Actually, I just found my copy.
Perfect.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. So tonight, the role of the Transportation and Mobility Commission is to review and analyze transportation projects, policy changes, program development, and other transportation matters affecting the public right-of-way. We follow a public process, including voting on action items during which the public has an opportunity to provide additional perspectives and information. In legislative matters, the role of the commission is advisory. The Planning Commission may hold separate meetings to consider our recommendations and provide their own. City Council may also hold separate meetings to consider our recommendation and make final determinations. The Transportation and Mobility Commission will conduct a meeting tonight and take public comments during designated times. Any written testimony received by 4 p.m. will be read into the record by staff. Any written testimony received by 2 p.m. will be read into the record by staff, and callers who have pre-registered by 2 p.m. on the Transportation and Mobility Commission survey page will be called upon to address the Transportation and Mobility Commission. Do we have, Jennifer, anyone that's signed up for that? Do you know? Or Julie?
I haven't received any contact from anyone interested in speaking tonight.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, well then I'll skip. Well, the next paragraph says when you're called, we'll promote you to a panelist so members can see and hear you as provide comments. If you're providing a formal recommendation of a neighborhood association, please tell us when that association voted on the matter as how many people were for and against. Please keep all remarks brief and to the point. Remarks should be directed to the Transportation and Mobility Commission as a body, not the audience or the staff, please. Do not repeat comments that have already been provided in print or verbally, and please show respect for the people commenting tonight, whether or not you agree with their comments. With that said, there will be an opportunity at the end of the meeting tonight for commission communication as outlined on the agenda. And with that, I think we will move right into the action items tonight. Jennifer, I know that you had mentioned we have a couple of guest speakers. Would you care or please introduce them so that we can proceed accordingly?
Yes, I can go ahead and introduce. So we've got, the items that we have for review tonight are the transportation improvement program. So we're bringing that back to the group based on requests to get more information and more opportunity to discuss that with staff. Chris Malone is on vacation, and so Ryan Laposa will be doing the presentation tonight. And then we also have the new Public Works Director here as well to participate and listen into the conversation. And then I think that we had one of the assistant city manager. I thought I saw somebody come up. Kennedy as well with community and development. So I can just
Lon.
Oh,
Lon
sorry.
Pluck. Yeah, Lon Pluck
Oh, okay.
is a deputy city for economic development.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I don't know, Ryan, do you want to go ahead and start, or Jennifer, do you want to do an introduction?
Yeah, I was just going to say hello and introduce myself. I'm Belknap Williamson, and since we also have Jennifer, another city person, I'm also fine with going by Jen if that's helpful for this group. But I just wanted to thank you all for volunteering your time to be a part of this I know that this group has been very excited and interested in engaging in our priorities around transportation and mobility improvements in the city. And as the Public Works Director, I know also that Chad, our Planning and Development Director, and Rebecca, our Deputy Director, are all really committed as leaders to making sure that this group feels like you are well supported from staff when you've got questions and ideas and input. And we really support you to feel like you also have a very functional commission and that you can get work done and keep moving forward. So I know that this transportation improvement program and the way that the projects were prioritized, there's been a number of questions over time. And so Ryan is here tonight to help try to wrap up the work that's been done in the past and talk about opportunities that are going to be coming in the future for your commission to share more input into this process. And so I just want to thank you again for your commitment and dedication and the help to the city with this work, and really let you know that we're here. You have a very functional commission that can give good input into our future transportation priorities.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that. It's always a pleasure to hear and have the support as well from you. With that said, Ryan, are you ready to take the floor?
Yes, I am. And Jennifer, thank you for those comments. I want to echo her comments about the appreciation we have for the time that you folks put in as commission members. I know we give you a lot of information to digest, and we spend time at these meetings trying to get through this information. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing to help support transportation in the city. Again, as Jennifer mentioned, wanted to spend just a few moments this evening talking a little bit more about the Transportation Improvement Program, try to address some of those lingering questions and issues that we have, and then really spend some time talking more about how we will start to work towards updating next year's TIP. We do this on an annual basis, and so I wanted to just kind of share with you a kind of a quick framework on how we would envision going forward. So Julie, if you can go to the next slide. This slide's just to re-emphasize the value we place on the partnership that we have with members of the commission. You're a new group to the city. It's a group that's been brought forward to help us better work through the setting of transportation priorities, looking at transportation policies, and then also looking at the projects themselves. And so I'm really excited that you folks have stepped up and volunteered your time. And I really want to emphasize the value we place on your role and how you fit within our overall process. Julie, go to the next slide if you would, please. So I think this is a slide you've seen before. This just kind of provides a little bit of a pathway in terms of where the Transportation Improvement Program fits within the overall city process. So, at the very highest level, we have our strategic plan, and then we have our comprehensive plan. And then as you work down, as you start to drill down, into transportation, we have the transportation system plan, which is the transportation element of the comp plan. And that's a document that, as you know, is being updated. We're updating a document that's pushing 20 years in age. And we're excited to be able to do that. We're excited about the role that you're playing in helping us to update that document. And that's going to really help to reset a lot of the framework under which we operate in the world of transportation within the city. It's going to give us some fresh policies and perspectives, and really help us to kind of reset transportation. The next level of that is our complete streets policy. That was a policy that was adopted by City Council a few years back that really got us on the road in looking at how we could make our streets work for not just cars and trucks and motorcycles, but also for folks who ride their bikes, for folks that walk, folks that use transit, mobility devices, basically everyone who wants to use our transportation infrastructure, regardless of the type of vehicle or the type of mode that they use. and regardless of their ability in using that mode. So that was a great jumping off point for us, and we've really tried to implement that policy throughout the city, both within our capital program and also within our pavement management program. And you know, some of that's going to be talked about, or quite a bit of that's going to be talked about later on this evening by Jennifer. But that's kind of the next layer. And then beyond that is the TIP itself. And the Transportation Improvement Program, is really it's the beginning of the implementation of all of those policies and framework above it. It's where we start to write those projects down. We start to list them out. We start to talk about how much the projects are going to cost. We start to talk about the schedule for the projects. So it becomes kind of our guide in how we start to implement these projects. And then, of course, within the TIP, or with the TIP in hand, we then move into the actual implementation. And that's one of the major elements of what I do for the city in leading our streets and transportation group, is getting those projects on the ground, built and open for use. Let's go to the next slide, Julie. So I know Chris has shared this slide with you before. I wanted to just real quickly go back over it. Why do we have a TIP? You know, why do we do this? And again, we do this every year. Well, again, it's the work plan that helps to guide our transportation needs, our you know, where we need to make improvements. It helps us to improve transparency and accountability. Again, we try to put everything we can into the TIP in terms of how much projects are going to cost, what the project's going to look like, what sort of a schedule the project is on. We also have a considerable amount of information in the TIP about finances, you know, how we fund our projects, where the funds come from, where they go to, and so forth. It also helps us to coordinate our planning efforts. So we work closely with Rebecca and her team to coordinate the work we do with the work that they do in terms of planning, you know, upcoming transportation projects, looking for opportunities to consolidate work. So if we have, you know, a project coming up that's also going to satisfy a long-range planning need, you know, helping to coordinate that effort. The TIP is a requirement if we are going to pursue state and local grant opportunities. Most of those grant programs require that we have a TIP and that we include the projects in the TIP that we're seeking those grant dollars for. And then at the end of the day, it's required by law. So there's an RCW there that tells us you need to do a TIP, you need to have a TIP in place, basically for all the reasons that I've talked about. But again, just to really solidify how the city is pursuing transportation improvements throughout the community. And it's always a 6-year look ahead. So we update it every year, but we're always looking 6 years ahead and just trying to not only address the projects we're currently working on, but also to start thinking about the projects that are going to be coming up on our list. Next slide, Julie. So how does a project make its way into the TIP, and how does it find its way out of the TIP? This is a question that's been asked, asked of us over a couple of years by council. How do you get a project on the TIP? And so what we've done in the past is we've brought together various staff from different groups at the beginning of the year when we're starting the update, and we start to just talk about, okay, what projects are not in the TIP that should be? Have we done a sub-area plan that's identified projects that now need to be in the TIP? Has there been a deficiency identified somewhere that should result in a project going into the TIP? And so, you know, and we collaborate with other agencies, we collaborate with WashDOT, Clark County, our budding cities. And so that's historically how the projects have found their way into the TIP. What we've done in more recent times, and this started last year, is we actually created a website where folks who want to introduce a project in the TIP can do so. They can go to that website, and that's the link at the bottom of this page, and they can enter in some basic information about the project, tell us, you know, where it is, what it's about, maybe give us a little bit of an idea of what's happening, what sort of problems are they seeing, and then that gets shot directly to us, and then we can look at that and we can start to mold that into a project, or even maybe tag that onto a project that we already have. And start to then focus on bringing that into the TIP. And, you know, a lot of times that'll be the result of something that's happened, whether it be an accident or or someone got caught in traffic, or they just see something out there that gives them concern, and so they have the opportunity to share that information with us. Usually the way the projects go out of the tip or are removed from the tip is they get done. So when a project is completed, it's been built, it's been closed out, that's when we then make the decision to remove it from the tip. And so again, that's part of the conversation we have each year as a city team. We also we talk about projects that should be added, but we also talk about projects that need to come out because they're essentially done. So any questions there? Ken,
Yeah, I
looks
have
like
a question. Yeah,
I
this
do.
is a Ken Williams here. Oh, sorry, Derry, I beat you. I think
I think you were first, Ken. Go ahead.
that's a tease. Is there? You must have some sort of methodology for taking out the really whack ideas. I think Evergreen Highway should be returned to dirt because that's historically what it is. There you go. Put it on the tip.
Oh yeah, we always get some interesting ideas, some interesting requests. You know, what the way I look at it is there's, you know, no idea is ever a dumb idea, just like no question is ever a dumb question. And so when someone comes at us with something that we say, that's a head scratcher, you know, I'll personally reach out to that person and maybe talk through what concerns they have. So if Commissioner Williams, you came to me and said, I think Evergreen Highway ought to be dirt, I'd probably reach out to you and I'd talk to you about, you know, why it costs a lot more to maintain a dirt road than it does a paved road. Why a lot of the folks who live along the Evergreen Highway probably wouldn't be very favorable to having a dirt road. And I would just work our way through some of the reasons why that might not necessarily be the direction we want to go in. And that, you know, that's something I do pretty regularly with folks who come to us, you know, even outside of the tip per se, who just say, hey, I think you ought to do this here. And we'll work through it. And really what's most important is we try to identify why they think that. What is the reasoning behind that? And maybe there's actually something there that is tangible that we want to consider. But it's kind of getting to the root of their concern that helps us get there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Ruggles here, that's interesting, Ryan. I have a similar question, except for that I was just going to say I like that. That's kind of like at the library, asking the reference question and getting to the true question. So that's nice to hear. And I wanted to know if you had any good examples of residents requesting a project that you actually thought worked. So the opposite again. Have you seen anything that has made you go, oh, we didn't know about that, and actually done it?
Well, we get a lot of requests. You know, one of our more frequent requests is how do we address you know, speeding and traffic levels in neighborhoods. And so a lot of folks will use the TIP portal to tell us about their neighborhood and, you know, why, you know, there's so many cars speeding through there. There's, you know, the kids are in danger, things like that. And so that creates an opportunity where we can sit down with them and talk to them about our neighborhood traffic calming program. We can talk about some of the other tools we have in our toolbox that help us to address neighborhood traffic safety. So that tends to be the more common one. I get questions a lot about someone driving on a busy corridor who says, you know, why isn't there a traffic signal here? It just feels like there ought to be. And so we'll receive that information. I'll send our traffic engineering folks out to take a look at that and see if that's the need for that signal meets those criteria that we use. And if so, then we start to move towards adding that into the tip. So we do a lot of additions to the tip just with the information we receive from our community members. Okay, let's go to the next.
I actually have a quick question for you before we go on.
Sure.
Since we're a new commission, the Transportation Mobility Commission, moving forward, you know, with the next 6-7 year plan for the TIP, is that something that we're going to see a little bit more involvement with, a little bit more of the process, you know, written into some of the development of that in the future?
Yes, absolutely. And I actually have some slides dedicated to that towards the end of this. So I'll get into that here in a bit. Yeah. We've always fully envisioned that the TMC would have a very, very robust involvement in the development of the TIP. So let me get there. Jill, you want to go to the next slide, please? So one of the things that we did with this year's TIP update was we introduced a project prioritization, and this was a pilot. And this really came on the heels of City Council. Within the last couple of years, as we've gone to council with the update to the TIP, they've asked the question, well, staff, how do you determine which projects you're going to do first, second, and third? How do you prioritize the projects in the TIP? And up until this year, the answer has generally been, well, we work on the projects that we think we can get grant dollars for. We work on those projects that are a good fit with our grant agencies, whom are going to give us money to help deliver those projects. And, you know, within those agencies and within their processes, they have criteria that they use to rank projects and to determine which projects get funds and which don't. And so we can always point to, you know, some of those ranking criteria like safety, congestion management, economic development, and things like that. But we never really had our own set of criteria. And so City Council last year said we really want to see that happen with the 2021 TIP update. And our immediate response at the time was, well, we are also embarking on an update to the Transportation Systems Plan, which we know is going to include development of a set of ranking criteria for our TIP projects. So we were thinking, let's wait for that TSP process to run its course and to produce that set of criteria. Council responded back and said, well, we want to get this happening sooner than that. We even if we introduce some type of a pilot program, we'd like to see something in the 21 TIP update. So what we did, we heard that loud and clear. So what we did was we worked with a consultant that we already had helping us with our asset management program, and we developed a pilot. And really what we did was we took some of the existing tangibles that we have within the city. So we have our comprehensive plan policies, we have our financial policies, and we have our strategic plan, all of which kind of help to spell out what is most important to the city in any given area, including transportation. And so we grabbed a hold of those policies, and we started to pull out some metrics that we could use for prioritizing projects. And those ranged from, and I'm gonna turn my head to just a different area here for a second. So out of that, we grabbed metrics like safety, equity, the climate, multimodal, economic development, management of congestion, viability of a project, and then really just taking care of what we have, which has always been a very strong policy priority for the city. So we were able to use those different metrics to establish this framework for how we could prioritize a project. And staff worked with a consultant to put those metrics together, to figure out some weighting criteria, and then just to really figure out how we could use that criteria to rank these projects within the TIP. And again, recognizing that this was interim, this was a pilot program, that really the development of the Transportation Systems Plan and the assistance by the Transportation Mobility Commission would help us to get to something way more permanent, way more set in stone. But this was really our attempt to just kind of bridge that gap between not having any kind of prioritization to having the what I call the full meal deal with the Transportation Systems Plan. So we used that, and that helped us to prioritize the projects for the 21 TIP update. And that's the information that was shared with you, as a part of the conversations we had. And, unfortunately, we simply did not have enough time to fully, talk about this with the TMC, a combination of, the work that the TMC was already doing with other elements, the onboarding and working on the TSP. We just did not have enough time fully talk about this. And so I think that's where a lot of the concerns came up about, well, where did this come from and who did this? And, you know, why is the Colombian saying this? And, you know, and things like that. And so, so I just wanted to, you know, I wanted to spend a little bit of time, you know, maybe better explaining why we did this prioritization, why we did this pilot project, but more importantly, where it's going to go from here. Julie, next slide, please. So again, some of the questions that came up from the TMC about, you know, how did the prioritization process get created? What sort of public outreach was done, and what are the different metrics, and what are the data sources associated with those? So again, we used a consultant we already had working for the city to help guide that prioritization process. We created this pilot project criteria, we scored it. And then once we did that, then as a part of the outreach of the overall TIP, which is very robust, we shared this interim prioritization. So we talked about this with our neighborhood associations. We put it out on our social media. We came to you a couple of times and talked about it. And you know, just really shared it with the groups that we typically reach out to when we're doing a TIP update. And again, stressing each time that this is an interim process. This is a stepping stone towards what ultimately will be made more permanent as a part of the TSP. And you know, again, the different metrics are listed here on the bottom of slide 7, and then going on to slide 8. So with safety, the city did a transportation system safety analysis a few years ago. So we took multiple years of crash data, helped us to identify where we were seeing concentrations of crashes and why those were occurring, and perhaps what could be done to resolve that. So we were able to use that safety analysis as a measurement tool to measure the safety of a particular project. Equity, we, as part of the TSP update, we've developed a draft economic vulnerability map, so that helps us to identify where our more vulnerable populations are in the city. So we were able to use that information to help provide an equity lens towards a project. And Julie, if you want to go to the next slide. And then this is the other metric, the rest of the metrics. Our multimodal, we use our existing bike and pedestrian route maps. Climate, we look towards the NEPA and SEPA regulations and how they apply to a transportation project. Asset management, we look at failing infrastructure. So if a particular project in the TIP is going to address something that we know is in failure, such as the surface of a roadway, or an outdated asset, such as an outdated signal or something, you know, then there's an element, a metric associated with that. Economic development, we looked at our sub-area plans. So, you know, if projects on the TIP were part of a sub-area plan, then that gave that particular project an advantage. If it was on our arterial network, same thing. Congestion, we looked at our concurrency program. We looked at transportation demand management and freight routes, just to identify how a particular project might satisfy, you know, one of those elements of congestion. And then viability, we really just looked at, okay, from an implementation standpoint, is this a project that is viable in terms of being able to acquire grant funding, and also possibly the opportunity to coordinate with other agencies. So we have a couple of projects happening right now where we're coordinating with WashDOT. We have a couple more projects where we're coordinating with Clark County. So, and those are always projects that are going to get a little bit more of a leg up because they might score better on a grant application. And we're taking advantage of not only city dollars, but also other agency dollars to help implement the project. So that increases the viability of the project. So those are the metrics that were incorporated into the pilot prioritization, and this is the data that was used associated with each of those metrics. Let's go to slide 9 if we could. So this is where I kind of wanted to open it up and maybe just hear from commission members as far as, were there any projects within the TIP that commission members wanted to maybe either consider, or well, let me back up, were there any projects not in the TIP that commission members would like to see added? Or are there projects in the TIP that commission members might want to see removed? Are there projects within the TIP that maybe the scope isn't quite the right fit? And these are all things that we would like to talk about, and we'd like the ability to take this into consideration for next year's 2022 TIP update. So I'm going to stop talking for just a little bit and turn it back over to the chair and see if there's any discussion we'd like to have here.
Get myself off mute here. So thank you for that. That's very great information, Ryan. I appreciate your laying that out for us and a little bit better understanding. Yeah, does any of the commissioners, I'll go ahead and open up the floor if he's willing to take some questions here. If anyone has a comment that they'd like to bring up?
Since I do, Commissioner Ruggles, Ryan, since you said no stupid questions, and I really don't know the difference or whether they are how they are related to each other, but can you give us a brief explanation of the differences and the interrelatedness in terms of, is it a time thing? Is it what the priorities are and how that's set up between the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan?
That's a really good question. I'm going to attempt at this. I might ask Rebecca to back me up on it as well. So the comprehensive plan is the city's, guiding land use plan for basically how the city, is going to grow, in the future. And it has a number of different elements built into it: environment, economic, and transportation. And so within the transportation element is really the transportation systems plan that you folks are working on now. The strategic plan and the comprehensive plan is usually like a 20-year document, it's a 20-year look. And so the strategic plan is a plan that City Council puts forward. It really kind of offers up more of a sense of overall community values. So I know one element of the strategic plan, and I won't quote it verbatim, but it talks about making sure that we're working towards having a safe and workable, for lack of a better term, transportation system. That we're providing a transportation system that folks can use, that they'll feel safe on, that has longevity to it. And there's a number of different, elements of the strategic plan that talk about a number of different community priorities. And so, a little bit of a difference between the strategic plan and the comp plan is the strategic plan is kind of setting some of those overarching community priorities. The comp plan then starts to take those and starts to provide some mechanism of implementation, within the land use realm. So does that help?
So, yes. Is the comprehensive plan, does that literally mean everything? So does that mean it includes everything that has to do with land use? So housing and transportation and business? I mean, is it literally everything? Is that why it's called comprehensive?
Yeah, let me ask Rebecca to respond to that. She's an expert here.
Yeah. So the comprehensive plan is sort of the long-term vision for how the city will grow and develop over time. It's a policy document. So it has different elements. It includes economic development, it includes housing, it includes public facilities, it includes the transportation element, which is the TSP, it includes parks, which is the parks comprehensive plan that they have a process for, and it rolls all those up into policies, and it provides a framework for growth and development. So we have a centers and corridors framework where we concentrate growth in our centers and corridors in areas that are well served by amenities and infrastructure, essentially. And we largely have typically left our residential areas alone and not concentrated growth there in the way we have in our centers and corridors. So that's a 20-year plan. It's a policy document. The strategic plan is a 5 or 6 year document typically, and it outlines key council priorities. And to Ryan's point, both for values, a safe and reliable transportation system, but also if you go one level deeper in the strategic plan, it says build these two things, right? So it outlines some of the council's short-term priorities. It aligns with the comprehensive plan. It does not have a formal relationship to it. It should align. If it doesn't, there's a problem. But when we work through the strategic plan with council, one of the lenses we put on it is this in alignment with the comprehensive plan? But there's lots of other lenses that are put on it as well, because it's reflective of a specific council's specific short-term priorities. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. And I have one more question for you in that case, Rebecca. So is there a process by which these discrete areas actually speak to each other and have a summary of like what's going on? And, you know, because since it's comprehensive, there's a lot. And so do they have something like that? Does somebody attend the different meetings and sort of summarize, like, this is where we are now, this is where we're going, here's the ultimate goal, and, you know, this is what they're doing over here in housing? Do you understand what I'm asking?
So there's no one body that is solely responsible for the implementation of the comprehensive plan outside the city council. The city council appoints boards and commissions, which are citizen oversight bodies, to focus on specific elements of the strategic plan. So you all are focusing on the transportation system plan. The planning commission looks at the entire comprehensive plan, but specifically the community development section of that. We have other boards and commissions that look at different other aspects of the strategic plan, but they are the body. And I will also say that the strategic plan is a policy document. So it doesn't have like a big list of things, and it's like we can go through and say, oh, we checked off these things, and those things. That's the strategic plan. That's what a strategic plan is. How do you implement those things? But the comprehensive plan basically says, here's how we're going to grow. And when we look at individual projects, when we look at either private or public, we ask, are they in alignment with the overall strategic plan? Do they align with the goals in housing, in public facilities, in community development, and economic development? Of course, those things are balanced. No project fully implements every policy in a strategic plan, right? We look for broad alignment, and we look for on balance, are we in alignment with it for an individual project? But the comprehensive plan, and I'm happy to talk to you offline about this, is very, very, very broad. And there are lots of different groups that are responsible for implementing or for advising on different elements of it.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about a little bit more maybe later about how, since with the systems approach, how these things talk to each other, and how, you know, how that can lend itself to the equity and ecology that we're planning for.
Thank you, Jennifer. Did anyone else have any comments before we let Ryan move on into our next field?
Yeah, I have a few questions. One, I'll get right down into the very granular change scope of projects. On the unfunded list, number 857, I think Ryan, you and Rebecca made this, you talked about this with council back in January, maybe, I don't remember when. And it was building sidewalks along Southeast 10th, and it was mentioned that a prime motivation was to get connectivity from multi-family dwellings to Ellsworth Elementary. As written, the section that is described is not near any apartment building. The section that should be is east of Ellsworth Avenue, heading over to the Cascade Apartments. And the way it's written is it's west.
Yes, I've noticed that myself, and I think what we want to do is we want to have both segments added into the tip, probably for different reasons. You know, the segment from Ellsworth, say, over to Choclaw, for example, is going to help address, you know, the needs of a lot of multimodal multifamily communities along that corridor. But then the segment between Ellsworth and 98th Avenue is obviously going to help address the needs of all the single family residents that live along the corridor. So we'll write that one down. But I think what we'll do is we'll add another segment of Southeast 10th and sidewalks to address that other piece east of Ellsworth.
Excellent, thank you. The second thing, maybe it's more of an observation than a question. You know, when I'm looking through this list, there are a bunch of classifications, capacity, traffic, multimodal, safety, etc. And I think to somebody who doesn't really have really dug in and torn apart these projects to know exactly what's in there, might come away with the conclusion, I think it's a mistaken conclusion, that the TIP, the funded stuff, is all about build more roads to make cars go faster. That's the takeaway that I get, because it's almost many of the funded things are capacity. So as an example, on Southeast First, I don't know, from my perspective, it's all about safety. I was once stupid enough to ride my bicycle on that street. And, you know, it should have had me committed for, you know, kind of suicidal tendencies, I think. So it's sure it's capacity, sure it's safety, sure it's multimodal. And I think it kind of sells the project short to just say capacity. And you can get, I don't know. So I'm wondering if there are some other way of casting, categorizing these programs, maybe how they score in the prioritization program you've got. That's just kind of a random idea.
No, that's an excellent point, because I completely agree. Southeast First is a lot more than solving a capacity issue. It's addressing safety. In fact, it's you know, safety is probably, I mean, it's huge. It's huge for safety out there.
Absolutely.
It's also satisfying, you know, some economic development needs. I mean, we're helping to improve that corridor so that Section 30 can continue to develop out. So, yeah, I think it'd be great if we could maybe do a better job of categorizing these, or at least giving each project maybe more than just one metric for what it's you know, what it's about. So I like that idea.
And the other one is, I'm not having a little hard time getting my wrapped around what I want to ask, but I was thinking about Councillor Hanson at last week's council meeting, commenting about, I think Fort Vancouver is being talked about for a safety improvement, which I think Jennifer will be talking about here in a bit. And he says, well, why, you know, where's St. John's and St. James in this whole process? And then this other little thread goes through that in the pilot prioritization tool, there's a line item and says, is this multimodal stuff, you know, is it a key link in, you know, fitting in the larger plan? Well, I'm sure it's out there, but I have never seen a larger plan for multimodal. To echo Councillor Hanson's things, like, how do I get from Clark College to, I don't know, what's that, Carol's Corner Cafe? Because that's where I want to go. So is that something that is in a TIP to sponsor a program to develop, you know, this overarching goal of objectives for what the multimodal arterials should look like, or is that a TSP thing?
Well, I think it's going to start with the TSP. So what I'm looking forward to seeing coming out of the TSP is an updated, you know, bike and pedestrian mobility map that helps us to understand, you know, where do we want to invest in our system to improve conditions for bike and peds, and certainly, you know, making investments both east, west, and north, south. And does it make sense if we're gonna make an investment on Fort Vancouver Way? Do we need to continue that investment, you know, up the St. James, St. John's corridor? And then ultimately, do we want to partner with Clark County to see that investment continued all the way up to whether it's 78th Street or the Paden? Well, at that point, it's one and the same. But yeah, I mean, that's the TSP. I think is going to help us get there. And then with what we see in the TSP, then we'll start to be able to realize what types of projects we need to add into the TIP.
Maybe I can just add one thing here so it's very clear. The last TSP we did in 2004 had a bike plan, a whole bike network plan. We have largely implemented that. The next TSP will have a whole bike, ped, transit, that will all have its individual elements that identify the network for those modes. The tip is not where the network is identified. That's the TSP. The tip is just an implementation tool. Once we have the policy identified in the TSP, then those things make it into the tip. Now, how fast they are actually built is part of, that is a council discussion that this group can weigh in on, but largely it is a function of the budget process. What are the resources we have to implement that network over time? It takes, obviously, this biennium we're doing 4 projects. That is a lift for the staff we have. So, that's sort of some of the speed at which things move from the policy document, here's the network we want to achieve, into the tip, meaning we're going to start to build these, is a function of the budget process.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Great questions. I appreciate that follow-up, Ryan. Was there more attached to that on your comprehensive planning outline there?
Yes, I have one more slide, and that was to talk about next steps. So Julie, if you'll go to that last slide. So as was asked earlier by the chair, what is the TMC going to have more involvement in the development of the TIP? And of course the answer is yes. And so we've started to lay out a schedule and a list of to-dos associated with our next TIP update, which will occur in 2022. So what we're hoping to do in late this year is to meet with this group, look at the projects again, look at the scoring, talk about, does that make sense? We think that we'll probably need to continue to use the pilot prioritization method for the 22 TIP update, because I don't believe we will have the TSP done in time for the 22 update. So we want to spend some more time talking about that pilot prioritization, look at how the project scored, and see if there's any tweaks we need to make to that. And so that's a conversation we want to have with you folks this fall to talk about that. And then early in 2022, when we start to kick off the TIP update, we'll produce an initial draft. We'll come back to the TMC and talk about that first draft. Again, continue talking about projects, talk about things that need to be added, things that obviously can come off the list, and then obviously talk about changes to scope of projects like what Commissioner Williams raised. And then in spring, and then this kind of follows the conversation we had this year. Then we start to work towards the final draft of the document. We come back again to the commission, talk about that document, get some final input from you folks before we start to advance that towards City Council. So I'm hoping 2, 3, 4 different opportunities to have a conversation about the TIP starting this fall, working into spring, or early spring of next year, where the commission will be involved in the development of the next TIP update. And and we'll massage that accordingly. If we need to spend more time, we can. If we don't need to spend as much time, we can do that too. So this will be our attempt to maybe kind of swing the pendulum the other way and maybe talk as much about this as we can. And then hopefully, as we move through the 22 update, we can find that middle ground where in terms of how the TMC is involved in the process.
Perfect. Now we were, thank you for that, Ryan. We were provided a couple meetings back, I think, the TIP project prioritization scores and an outline of where those current projects were, or those projects are currently, I should word that properly. Is that something similar to what we'll be reviewing in response to the scoring process?
Yeah, so in late 2021, we'll review that same list of projects and the scores that they received. And we can talk about, why did this project score this way in this particular area? Or why did this project score so much better than this other project? So we'll be able to do a little bit of drilling into the projects and how they scored, and maybe help to validate whether the pilot scoring process is working, or again, if we need to massage it a bit. So that's the work I'm hoping that we can do this fall, and then really then be ready in early 2022 to take whatever comes out of our conversations this fall and start to formulate that into the next update.
Great. That sounds terrific. I appreciate you taking the time to go over that with us, and we look forward to being able to really dive down into that and get involved with it. So look forward to the next steps on that, Ryan. I appreciate your input tonight.
Appreciate the time. And again, folks, really, really value the time you're spending on this. It helps us a lot to work through these types of issues, gives us the perspective that we were hoping we were able to get from you as representatives of the community and representatives in different aspects of transportation. So I really, really welcome the feedback that you're providing. And certainly anytime, if between now and the fall, if you want to, ask a question about a particular project or a particular aspect of the tip, by all means, feel free. We'll endeavor to work through those, and then that'll just set us up for a better conversation this fall. So again, appreciate the time this evening.
Thank you again for the clearer vision as we move forward, and yeah, we look forward to working with you on the next steps. With that said, moving on down the agenda items this evening, it looks like we have an informational item on the Complete Streets program. Jennifer or Julie, I apologize. I did not get a note on who was planning to present that for us this evening.
So that was going to be something that I was going to present to the TMC tonight.
Okay.
So this is kind of based on a, thank you, Julie, for getting it all set up for me. This is a presentation that I gave to council a couple weeks ago, and wanted to go through kind of the same presentation with you because you'll play a very important role in kind of the review of the analysis and potential design alternatives or concepts for these projects. So it's a lot of slides, and so I pared it down a little bit from when we went to City Council. So I'll try to get through everything tonight. We've got actually we're ahead of schedule, so we've got some good time to go through this and have discussion if you have questions or comments about the different projects or just kind of the overview of Complete Streets. So that's just a little bit of a background on the presentation, and I can go ahead and get started. If you could move to the next slide, please, Julie. So as part of City Council's biennium budget process, there were quite a few projects that we were looking at in conjunction with the city's pavement management program. So I think we've talked about this before at previous meetings, but we've been very efficient. Like Rebecca was mentioning earlier, we've done quite a few bike projects that were identified in the original bicycle master plan that was completed in 2004 as part of the transportation system plan process. And a vast majority of those projects were done in partnership with pavement projects. And so we've looked at opportunities when the pavement management program is going to go out and do a microsurfacing or a full kind of pavement reconstruction project, taking those opportunities where there's basically a clean slate on the street and seeing and discussing what we'd like to have go back down. So a similar project to that is the Columbia Bicycle and Mobility project that's out under construction right now. So Columbia, as you probably all are aware, was in dire need of reconstruction. And so that was an opportunity that we had to go out and make some safety and mobility changes to the corridor in partnership with the pavement management project that was going on. And actually the McLaughlin project, safety and mobility project that Anna Dearman brought to you earlier this year, that was another opportunity as well. So that project, if I remember correctly, was slated to have a resurfacing or a microsurfacing treatment either last year or this year. And so that was another opportunity that we were looking at to make changes to the street. The timeline for that paving project got pushed out. And so we were able to kind of have that opportunity to talk about a pilot project on McLaughlin. So McLaughlin is slated to be microsurfaced in 2023. And so we will bring back to you, like Anna mentioned in the presentation that she had, we'll bring back to you kind of the results of that evaluation process probably early next year is the potential timeline that we're looking for that. And so that'll bring kind of a set of recommendations for you to review and to advise to City Council on how we should move forward. Should we kind of keep the striping that went down as part of that project, or should we make changes to the corridor based on kind of the evaluation process that we went through? So looking at these opportunities that we had, and the pavement management program has done a really good job of giving us more time to review projects that they have that are up and coming over the next 2 to 3 years. And so that gives us more opportunity to look at other additional ways that we can improve streets and have well and robust public outreach processes part of the projects too. And so with the list that we've been provided by the pavement management program and discussions that we had for the 21-22 biennial city council budget process, there was 4 projects that was selected to look at making complete streets improvements over the next couple years. And so those 4 projects are listed here. So 4th Plain Boulevard from Main Street to Andreessen, Southeast 34th from 164th to 192nd, 112th from Mill Plain to 4th Plain, city limits, and then Fort Vancouver Way from Mill Plain to 4th Plain. And so I'll go through each of these projects a little bit later, but I was just going to do kind of a brief overview of complete streets and why we build complete streets. Some of this information you've seen, some of it's new. So once we get through kind of the complete streets overview section, I can stop. And if you have questions or comments, we can take those then. So next 2 slides, Julie. So why do we build complete streets? We've got the complete streets policy that was adopted in 2017 that we've talked about before. And so there's that hierarchy, and that came up earlier in the conversation with the comprehensive plan. And within that is the transportation system plan. We've got city council's strategic plan, and then the new values kind of decision-making process that they identified earlier this year that is a part of that strategic plan. And then the complete streets policy kind of sits underneath that in terms of just the layering that we've kind of showed you before in terms of kind of policy development and policy implementation at the city. And so, the kind of the major primary vision of the city's complete streets policy is to provide safe, accessible streets for all users, ages, and abilities, regardless of how they choose to travel. And if you go through the complete streets policy, it provides kind of more informational, more detailed information about kind of the different elements that we have kind of listed here. So while it's not only the street system itself, we're looking at land use and other components of that as well as part of the complete streets policy. And we will be looking at ways that we could potentially be making improvements or updates to the complete streets policy as part of the transportation system plan. And that's another role that the TMC will play as well, is reviewing that policy and better integrating it into the transportation system plan, because it was done at a time where we had the very old transportation system plan while recognizing the need for a policy like the complete streets policy. And so we'll better integrate that into the upcoming update of the transportation system plan that we have. Next slide, please. So you've seen some of this safety data already, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But again, it's just to give you an overview of kind of what we're seeing in terms of trends. And this was done for the transportation system safety analysis that was done before the transportation system plan update that provided the city's first citywide collision analysis to kind of give us a sense of what was going on in the transportation system. And again, kind of key takeaways from this is that we have a pretty significant issue with young drivers in the city and in terms of the number of collisions. And then also our most vulnerable roadway users, people riding, people walking, and then people riding motorcycles. We see a much smaller number of collisions happening, but a much higher fatality rate with those users. Next slide, please. And we've shared this map as well that kind of gave us a sense when we looked at the citywide street network. And this is just looking at the arterial street system, kind of those segments of the streets where we were seeing a high number of collisions. And 4th Plain in that section kind of west of Andreessen was a surprise to us to see the number of collisions in that section of the corridor. But some of the other kind of streets like Mill Plain, that's a little bit to be expected given the traffic volumes that are out there on the east side of the city. And then just kind of further up on 4th Plain as you kind of get into that between the city and the county border there. Next slide, please. So this is some new information that we've been sharing that was a part of a smart growth study that was done looking at pedestrian collisions and outcomes based on income. And then we also have a slide on race and ethnicity as well that we'll be sharing. And we wanted to, before we share this information, we wanted to take a look at the fatalities, pedestrian fatalities that had occurred in the city and see if there were similarities between the kind of the outcomes that was shown in this national study that was done. And they're very similar to one another. And so it's just a way to start thinking about as we start to incorporate equity into the conversation, and then safety as well, as some of our most vulnerable roadway users, people walking, we see a pretty significant disparity between low income residents and higher income residents in terms of people that are being hit and killed while out walking in the community. Next slide, please. And so this is just one that shows kind of the same concept based on race and ethnicity. And so as you see, you can kind of see the median line for the average US population, and then you can see based on race and ethnicity, kind of the fatality rate that you're seeing. And we're seeing in communities of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, much higher fatality rates when they're out walking within their communities. Next slide, please. And then we also thought that this was a valuable slide to bring into the conversation as well, because there's been a lot of talk over the years and just in different various forms of just kind of national, state, and local policies and programs in terms of equality and equal access to meetings and facilities and things like that. But we're kind of moving beyond that as we talk about how we can improve equity in the system, equity in programs, equity in services. And so as we talk about the transportation system, when you think about it, we can provide equal access to everybody. So in this concept, in this drawing, it's a tightrope. So everybody has access. They can use that rope to get across the chasm there if they'd like to. But is that safe? Is it providing the best access for everybody? Is it providing equal access to everybody? And so then we kind of start to have that conversation of what's the best way to provide a facility when we're talking about the transportation system that provides equal and equitable access to everyone. And so that's that image on the right of the bridge. So people can walk across that, they can bike across that safely, they can use a mobility device, they can use a wheelchair, or drive a car. So everybody has kind of the same kind of access to get across that facility. We just thought it was a nice way as a visual tool to try to explain that a little bit better. Next slide, please. And so these are just some of the mobility elements of complete streets that we wanted to outline. So again, there are land use and even housing, affordable housing and housing, and lots of other kind of land use policies that are related to transportation and complete streets. But these are kind of the key mobility ones that we look at as we talk about transportation projects and improving access and safety and equity for people. So it just provides an outline of kind of the different components of complete streets that we can look at. So there's transit, there's traffic calming, there's facilities for people walking and biking, and then there's signal improvements that we can make, and then also things like street trees and medians as well. Next slide, please. And then, as we also know with complete streets projects, there can be some pretty difficult and challenging and significant trade-offs that come with these projects. And that's why public process and public outreach is just so core to these projects. And so this was a graphic that someone within our work group did a really nice job of kind of visualizing the different trade-offs and considerations that we can think about as we're implementing complete streets. So there's benefits to complete streets, but there also can be challenges such as changes to how individual people are living, how they're familiar with or used to living in their homes or their residences or using a street, things like parking removal, as we know with the West Side Mobility Project, the Columbia Street Project. But then you can also have safety benefits from those projects, increased equity and access from those projects as well. Next slide, please. So before I get into the 4 complete streets projects that we were looking at, does anybody have anything kind of that they wanted to ask about the complete streets overview that I provided?
Yeah, Jennifer, just a quick one. Going back a couple of slides about the complete streets, kind of a cross section, there was a note about like sidewalks should be separated from travel lanes. Does that imply that an incomplete street, to make that term up, is where the sidewalk is right on the curb? So that would not be considered a complete street. I'm using 112th Avenue as an example, up in the 40s part of the world, where the sidewalk is right next to the gutter. So that would be an incomplete street.
Yeah, I don't know that we would use the term incomplete, but it doesn't meet kind of the vision and the goal of a complete street. And the street standard that we would have nowadays for 112 and what some sections have been built to when we've had development come in is they have a planter strip in there. So that is the optimum design standard that we strive for. But when we're looking at a street like that, where it's an existing kind of curb to curb line, and with these projects that we'll be going through, we have the opportunity to make changes in the street between those 2 curb lines. We can look at opportunities for adding planter strips and things like that, but then you get into right-of-way impacts, people's homes, and things like that. So looking at other ways that maybe we can add a buffer to the street. So in some cases, if there's an attached sidewalk, a bicycle facility could become a buffer for people walking. So looking at other ways to maybe implement or add that feature if we are unable to move the curb line or do a significant capital project like that.
Perfect, thank you.
I have a question for you, Jennifer. And with under this, I think it was under the street trees, what's an example of like a refuge? Is that, can you give us an example of that?
So an example of a refuge island is, we've done some of those on 4th Plane. So we've done some hawk signals on 4th Plane, and the best one, I think the best example on 4th Plane is the one that C-Tran did down about, I think it's about 56 or 54th Street. They did that really nice refuge crossing island in the middle of 4th Plane with the hawk signal for the BRT stations on 4th Plane. And then they also did some similar ones on Fort Vancouver Way. So optimally, we look for refuge islands that are wide and provide a kind of an area that people can stay if they need to cross the street one side at a time. It provides them a good area to maybe wait and some buffer between moving cars. And then also one that's landscaped as well, because that kind of can potentially help with traffic calming and things like that.
Great, thank you. And then one other little follow-up on that. So when you're talking about planting, so it's wonderful to have trees and planting. So are they just making sure that they're the kinds of things that don't interrupt sightline, or they're choosing those kinds of things? So they can still have green?
Yeah, so we look for, if we're going to do trees, then we work closely with the urban forester, and make sure that the tree, obviously and two, if we're going to be planting it in the street, that it's not going to get too big, the roots aren't going to be invasive to where it would damage and block somebody's visual sight distance when they might be waiting. And typically we set the trees back from the refuge itself if we have enough room. And then plantings as well, lower plantings, so that does not obstruct the view of people driving. Any other questions or feedback? Okay, so I'll just go ahead and get into the projects themselves. So if you could go, next slide, please, Julie. So you'll see some similarities to how the presentation is structured for each 4 of the projects. They each will have a project overview slide, usually 1 or 2 kind of project context sensitive slides, a little bit of information, what we know about the project or the existing conditions already, public outreach, and then also design considerations. And so they all have those similar sides. And so they're they can get repetitive, particularly this project overview one. The project scope and the project goal is the same for all 4 projects. Really what's just different is kind of what will be done to the street. And so to start with Fourth Plain, what we'll be looking at on Fourth Plain is that in 2023, the street is going to be have like a rubber chip seal is the treatment, the name of the treatment that'll be done on the street. And it'll be done from Main Street to Andreessen Road. And so as we know, there's a lot of collisions going on in this section of Fourth Plain, and we see this as a very high priority for the city to look at ways that we can improve safety and mobility on this section of Fourth Plain. And then, like I mentioned, project scope, complete a traffic analysis along the corridor, develop and implement a comprehensive public outreach process, develop potential design alternatives, and potential improvements are all the same for all the 4 projects. And then the project goal, complete a public outreach process and design alternatives process that improves safety, mobility, and equity on the different corridors. Next slide, please, Julie. And I should mention that, so for this process, we're looking from Main to Andreessen, and I believe that it will be in 2025 that the pavement program will come back and do the segment of Fourth Plain West. So they'll be going west to, I believe it's out to the port, as far out to the port, that section of Fourth Plain West. So that'll be coming up as well. Although we have done, as we talk about kind of the project context and the background on the project, we've done a road diet on Fourth Plain. So it used to be 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, kind of west of F Street. And in some areas, the travel lanes were about 9 feet wide. We had issues with semi-trucks coming down and actually hitting people walking and also taking off their mirrors on the utility poles. So it was very narrow, a very challenging environment. And there was a significant community process and discussion that went on. And so that project was done in the mid 2000s and added the bike lanes and the center turn lane and then 1 lane in each direction. And then also the section of Fourth Plain that we're looking at from kind of east of I-5 to Andreessen was part of a traffic safety corridor project back in 2003 to 2005. And even at that time, that was something that was identified with the Washington Traffic Safety Commission, that there were a significant number of collisions happening on Fourth Plain. And so there was a lot of work that was done as part of that project, enforcement, a lot of education that went on, and we did quite a few of the crossing improvements on Fourth Plain that you see that are there now. Although at the time, there was a device called a lighted crosswalk. I don't know if some of you have been around long enough to have known what those were, but they were lights, kind of like runway lights in the street. And the city had installed some of those on Fourth Plain at other locations, and they were just a maintenance nightmare and weren't found to be very helpful. And so we upgraded a lot of those crossing to overhead yellow flashing lights, and then particularly on Fourth Plain, even with the overhead yellow flashing lights, we were still seeing fatalities and serious collisions on the corridor, so those were upgraded to the hawk signals, the red flashing signals to require people to stop. And then also we have in consideration with the Fourth Plain project is the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project. So original plans back with the Columbia River Crossing project that there was supposed to be about 1,000-car parking garage kind of tucked between the Clark College campus and I-5, just north of McLaughlin. And it was a huge building, and it was going to add new access and improve access up to Fourth Plain, kind of there at the interchange, and basically kind of redo the Fourth Plain interchange. So we are working in cooperation with that project as it continues to move forward to see if that parking garage will still be there as part of high capacity transit. If it is, what improvements are going to be made to the interchange, and making sure that we consider that potential impact of any improvements through the bridge project. as part of this process. Next slide, please. So this again is kind of that repeat of the slides. So kind of what we know about existing conditions on 4th Plain right now. The speed limit's posted 25 miles an hour. The average daily traffic that we see, so that's the amount of traffic that you see in a 24-hour period. It varies from year to year, and because it's just a snapshot, a couple-day snapshot of when you take those counts. But we see a variation of about 15 to 28,000 cars a day, and it's really when you get down to Andreessen where you see that higher number around 25, 23, 28, kind of depending on the year that the count was taken, that you're seeing high levels of counts. And then it's more around 15 to 20 when you're on the west side near Main Street. And a majority of the corridor has 4 lanes with the center turn lane, but there's some sections that have no center turn lane, such as west of Fort Vancouver Way. And then collisions, we've had 615 collisions, which is quite significant between May 2015 and May 2021. A lot of incidences of people walking and people biking, and we've had 3 fatalities on the corridor during that time. And then facilities like we've kind of talked about, we have a lot of pedestrian crossings, refuge islands that we've already done. We have some bicycle facilities on the corridor, and then it's primarily, well, it's all attached sidewalks in most areas along the corridor. Next slide, please. And then for public outreach, this is an opportunity that we used for each of the projects just to identify kind of the key stakeholders. And based on the conversation that we had with City Council a couple of weeks ago, we added additional stakeholders to these slides. So that changes from project to project, and then the primary tools really remain the same for each project. Next slide, please. And then design considerations. So that's a little bit different for each project, but pretty much the same. So really what we're looking at for these 4 projects is the opportunity, 1, to look at whether we can do a repurposing of a travel lane. So on 4th Plain, that would look at the opportunity of removing a travel lane, well, not removing, but repurposing a travel lane in each direction. And for 4th Plain, that is not something, and for all of these projects, actually, it's not something that we're coming in with a preconceived notion or a decision or an idea already. And so we want to leave that up to the public outreach process to help guide. We also have policy that's been identified by City Council, but we really are coming into this looking at the traffic analysis, the results of that traffic analysis, what that's going to say and what that's going to share with us in terms of information and options that we have. And then also the public outreach process. So for 4th Plain, it could be a BRT only lane for the Vine. It could be bicycle facilities. We could look at like a shared biking, walking facility. Even parking has been mentioned as an option along the corridor. Some businesses have requested maybe the potential of having on-street parking in some of the corridor. So that's the things that we'll be looking at through the traffic analysis process and the public outreach, and then the design concept process. And then we'll also be looking at other ways that we can improve safety. So if there's a reason why we can't repurpose the travel lane, or there's just not support from the community or from City Council or from the TMC for repurposing a travel lane, what other safety improvements could we look at making on the corridor? And that's also, if we do decide to repurpose the travel lane, we also would look at what other safety improvements that we could do. So it's not just one or the other, it's looking at the opportunities for both.
Jennifer, can I ask you a question before you move on?
Yeah, I was gonna stop there and see if you had any questions specifically about 4th Plain.
I do, thank you, yes. So with the design considerations, one of the stakeholders for 4th Plain was 4th Plain Forward. So I am wondering, like when I've heard a little bit about complete streets and smart growth, also I've heard about placemaking. So when you're talking about stakeholder input, is that part of it? Like is part of this design process, including the concept of like supporting small businesses along 4th Plain and creating something like placemaking?
Yes, I mean, while we'll be looking, and our focus is from curb to curb for this project, we will be looking at opportunities and listening to the community about other potential ways that we could make improvements to the corridor, such as the street mural that was recently done in a neighborhood just north on the north side of 4th Plain, because the 4th Plain area is unique in that it has the highest percentage of business owners and employees in the city that also work within the 4th Plain area, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of people that live in the area, but then that also work or own businesses in the area. And so that's a pretty significant when you talk about placemaking for the corridor, making sure that people can safely access their place of work is, I think, very critical. But yeah, we can also have those conversations about what other improvements outside of the scope of this project we could potentially look at doing.
A quick question. What does access management mean?
Thank you. Access management. So access management is, so Mill Plain out on the east side, so kind of east of Chicala, is a good example of access management. So there's that median that runs down the center of Mill Plain and really limits the amount of left-hand turn opportunities. So instead of having an open center turn lane, you have a median or a curb line there that prevents left-hand turn lanes, because what happens, particularly on a corridor like 4th Plain or other corridors in the city where you have a lot of driveways, and then you also have the open center turn lane. And so there's a lot of conflicting movement, people making lefts this way and people making lefts this way. You see the tendency for higher collisions between people driving, and then also you have a higher, risk factor for people who might be walking or biking, with people trying to make those turning movements. So it'd be the installation of a median or a curb to potentially lessen the amount of left-hand turn movement.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Jackson with a question. So I'm wondering, when I served on the bus rapid transit for 4th Plain corridor, one of the things that seemed lacking to me was a discussion or education about the fact that 500 was being improved to move traffic through, and there were still people that seemed to feel that that's what 4th Plain was just for the movement of traffic. And I'm wondering if there could be discussion about how this could really be more of a destination type place and more neighborhood space than just moving traffic through, now that we have such a great thoroughfare on 500.
Yeah, and that would be the opportunity to have that discussion of the travel lane repurposing. So that would bring up kind of what you're saying in terms of, what do we want this corridor to be? Do we want it to be just moving traffic through very fast, which we know that if you have a business and you want people to see your business, having people drive through like at 35 or 40 miles an hour isn't going to help you with that. So bringing down speeds, ways that we can bring better attention to the corridor and maybe not have it as a thoroughfare. So that is definitely one of the things that we would have discussions with the community about, and educate the community in the conversations that we're having too. Any other questions on 4th Plain? Okay, so I will, we can go on to the next, if you can go through the next 2 slides, Julie. So Northeast 112th is the next street that we are looking at. And so this is a street actually that's scheduled for a asphalt overlay in 2022 from 28th to 4th Plain. And one of the kind of key comments that we got from several council members at the workshop that we had was the timeline on some of these projects and not being pushed up against a deadline like we had with the West Side Bike Mobility Project. And so this is potentially a project that we may be able to push out a little later, because while this pavement project in 2022 was only for the section of 28th up to 4th Plain, there are anticipated plans to come back in the next couple years and do the section south of 28th to, I believe, Mill Plain was the other section that they were looking at doing. And so the project process that we'll be going through is looking at the entire corridor of 112th. And then, like I mentioned, the project scope and the project goal are the same for all of these, so I won't read through them again. Next slide, please. So some context for 112th Avenue. So there was a 112th Avenue corridor plan that was completed in 2011. And what kind of the purpose of that plan was to develop some guidance and some structure and some policy around the planned improvements that were supposed to happen at the 18th Street interchange. And then also there was supposed to be an interchange at 28th Street that WashDOT had been proposing for a really long time. And only the southern half of the interchange was done at 18th Street. And WashDOT right now has no plans to come in and finish the north side of that interchange, nor do the interchange at 28th Street. And so the plan was done in preparation of that and preparing for the changes that would be brought on by those interchanges. And so it really relied on looking at ways to widen out the street. So in a lot of areas, we have 100 feet of right-of-way on 112th, which is a lot of right-of-way, but that's kind of what the standard, if we wanted to do detached sidewalks, a planter strip, a bike facility, 2 travel lanes, and then the center turn lane, that would be kind of the amount of right-of-way that you would be looking at. So a pretty wide street. And so it kind of relied on the idea that that type of improvement could be made in the corridor in conjunction with the interchange projects, except for kind of the area where we have the Evergreen Memorial Garden. There are burial sites essentially right up to the back of the curb on the east side of the Memorial Garden there. And so even if you were looking at doing a capital widening project on 112th, or in this case where we're looking at doing potential safety improvements to the corridor or repurposing the travel lane, we have that constrained area in the corridor and missing sidewalks. And so that's something that we've continued to talk about as we've infilled most of the missing sidewalk segments on 112th, what to do about that pretty significant missing sidewalk gap on the east side of 112th. Next slide, please. And then we also had another safety corridor project on 112th through the Washington Traffic Safety Commission. Again, it relied heavily on enforcement, over 300 hours of extra enforcement, education. And then with this project, there was actually quite a bit of infrastructure improvements that were made, mainly to signals. So signal upgrades in terms of the ability to make enhancement to signal timing. There were some medians that were added. So a lot of the signal changes a lot of the capital improvements that were done were signal enhancements and then turn pockets and things like that. So improvements to improve the flow of the amount of traffic kind of driving through the corridor. Next slide, please. And again, this is kind of some of just like the baseline information that we know about the corridor. It has a posted speed limit of 35 miles an hour. Average daily traffic varies from about 12,000 down around 9th Street and kind of a little bit closer to Mill Plain. And then as you go farther north up on the corridor up to SR 500, it gets up to 33,000 average daily vehicles on the corridor. And that is just something that, because WashDOT will no longer be doing the interchanges at 18th and 28th, there's just going to be a lot more traffic on 112th to access SR 500 and Mill Plain, because it's such a significant segment of corridor without any other interchange access points. So a large area of kind of the east side of the city either need to access 205 via Mill Plain or SR 500. So it's just two kind of pinch points where a lot of people are funneling in to the state highway system. And so you get a lot of traffic volume as you get closer up to 500, making this project a little bit more challenging. We have had a significant number of collisions on the corridor, 355, 7 people who were walking, 6 who were biking. We had 3 fatalities between May of 2015 and May of 2021. And then we also had 2 fatalities in 2014 as well, just the year before. So a lot of fatalities that have been occurring on the corridor, primarily people walking. Facilities, there's no mid-block crossing on the corridor, no dedicated bicycle facilities, attached sidewalks for a majority of the corridor, and we still are missing some sidewalk segments on the corridor. Let's see, next slide, please. So this again is just the public outreach, same slide. Stakeholders are just a little bit different, but pretty similar. Businesses, neighborhoods, CTRAN, in this case, Evergreen School District, Evergreen Memorial Garden, and then system users. And then the primary outreach tools remains the same. Next slide. And this again is the design consideration. So really similar to Fourth Plane, looking at the opportunity to repurpose a travel lane, to maybe look at adding bicycle facilities or a shared biking walking facility where we don't have it. We haven't really heard interest from the community for parking on this corridor. There's no high capacity transit, so we wouldn't be looking at a BRT only lane on this corridor necessarily. And then safety improvements, how we could make changes to the corridor to improve safety for all users. So I will stop there. Any questions or comments on 112th at all?
Yeah, I have one. I'm thinking about when I go along 112th, what really strikes me is the maintenance of the sidewalks is abysmal. Many of the sidewalks are just overgrown with weeds and brambles and stuff, and between the, it's just horrible. You can barely, a single person can barely walk through the garbage, the litter, the brambles and such. And I've gone to the little, public works portal, I don't know how many times. And the situation is always the same in that if you look at that cross section, here's curb to curb, here's sidewalk, here's some garbage grass, and here's a fence. Behind that fence is an apartment, or maybe it's a private home, I don't know, but they do not see that sidewalk. So they don't feel any ownership to the maintenance, and hence it's neglected. And, the city's in the awkward situation of, I don't know, threatening who knows what, but nothing seems to move very fast. And I just fear that putting all these lovely, the renderings you've got, and pretty soon it's overgrown and filled with garbage. So is there any thought to how those kind of facilities can be maintained?
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate to hear that if you're putting requests through the Public Works, the maintenance request form, usually Public Works has been very responsive to those. So what I would suggest is if you have a list or if you have locations, send those to me and we can get those taken care of. But it's like you're saying, it's a cycle, right? If we come out and make those improve or cut back the vegetation in a year or two, it's going to be overgrown again. So it is definitely a very challenging corridor. And what you're saying is it's a 5-foot attached sidewalk. And then a lot of areas you just have a fence right up against the back of sidewalk that makes it kind of a challenging place to walk along. But if there's specific homes that aren't maintaining, if there's like an area between the back of sidewalk and their fence, and there's issues with maintenance there, then we can contact them as well. So that would be what I would suggest and recommend. Any other questions or comments on 112th?
Yeah, just one other. I was listening to some podcast on, was it Carmel, Indiana, where they are eliminating every traffic signal, putting in roundabouts, which is a pretty bold thing to do. So I'm just wondering, is roundabout something that might be considered in all of these projects? It's pretty well documented that they are far safer for automobiles than either T intersection, signalized intersections.
It's not in the scope of these projects because we really have the opportunity, and what we're really focusing on is the curb to curb line and the striping and what would go back down. We have the opportunity to make some other accessibility improvements, like if we wanted to do a leading pedestrian interval at an intersection to give people crossings, additional time to get across before cars are able to go. We can look at things like that. I don't know that roundabouts would come up in terms of the traffic analysis discussion, but that would be a whole other project and a whole other process and funding that would be needed for those types of projects. But yeah, it's not something that we're looking at with this project in a retrofit situation, particularly because it's difficult to retrofit a roundabout into a signalized intersection. Any other questions? Okay, so the next project is Southeast 34th Street. So if you can just skip to the next slide. Thanks, Julie. So Southeast 34th Street. So this is another project that's slated for next year as well. And so what we're looking at doing is a microsurface treatment from 164th to 192nd. And this is a, if you could go to the next slide, please, Julie. This is a pretty significant gap in the city's bicycle network. And as people have come in, so with the old Hewlett-Packard campus, as developers have come in and considered the site, a lot of feedback that we got was they're looking for a site that people can access by transit and access by biking, because that's what their employees are looking for, or potential employees coming into a site like that. And so this is a really good opportunity for us to look at the potential of repurposing a travel lane in the corridor to add bike facilities along the corridor. We have the Vancouver Innovation Center, the VIC, which is, you know, redeveloping the HP campus. And kind of as you read through their site and their materials and look at their cross sections, they really are focusing on safety and accessibility and biking through the site. And so the thing that we need to consider is that's great, but we need to make sure that people can safely get to their site from the kind of surrounding residents and neighborhoods. So that's where Southeast 34th comes in as a pretty critical link. The developers are aware that we have this project and that we'll be doing this process, and they have been supportive up to this point. So we are working with them and making sure that they're involved. And then the Fisher's Landing Elementary School, which is on the south side of 34th Street, you can kind of maybe see the little flag there. The walking shed for that school actually encompasses the VIC site, as well as some of the neighborhood areas west of 176th. And so we look at safe routes to school opportunities, ways to improve walking and biking safety for kids who may want to do that, but may be afraid to do that right now. And then also there's the Fisher's Landing Transit Center. So CTRAN has that long-term plan to redevelop the Fisher's Landing Transit Center, add residential units to their site, as well as business and commercial, and increase the site of the, or increase the size of the transit center. So again, trying to accommodate people who may want to like bike or you know, walk to the transit center when they develop that in the future. Next slide, please. So a little bit of information that we know about the project. The ADT is 7,000 to 13,000, so significantly less than some of the other projects that we're looking at. The posted speed limit is 40 miles an hour. It has good access management on the corridor as well. So there's a nice medium for a majority of the corridor with a landscaping, and it's got 2 lanes in each direction, and in some areas it does have a center turn lane. We were actually surprised, given the street, the number of collisions that had occurred on the corridor, and one with someone that was walking along the corridor. There is a mid-block crossing that was installed to address neighborhood concerns about being able to cross from the south side to the north side, to being able to access the residential area along with you know, the Fred Meyer and those other businesses and commercial areas that are just north of there. There's no bike facility on the corridor. There's attached sidewalks as well. Next slide, please. So the key stakeholders looks really similar. The VIC developers, again, CTRAN, because they're looking at potentially adding service along Southeast 34th Street that would connect into the Mill Plain BRT system. And then businesses and neighborhoods and system users, the primary tools are the same. Next slide, please. And then really kind of the focus of this project with the travel lane repurposing is looking to adding bicycle facilities on the corridor to make that connection within the city's bike network. And then safety improvements, what other potential like mid-block crossings or things like that that we could do to improve biking and walking for people along the corridor. And that that ends the Southeast 34th Street. Any questions or comments on 34th at all?
I actually do. As someone who travels that road quite frequently, you know, from what I understand, the intersection that was added on for the walkway is somewhere approximately to 172nd, gives access up into Heritage Park. Looking at the map right now, I mean, all the way through that corridor already has sidewalks and bike lanes going into some of the public access spaces. And it's a newer development, you know, than some of the other areas that you're talking about. Does any of that factor into, I mean, that there's already safe sidewalks, there's already public access into parks? Does it any of that, or will any of that factor into the design implementations moving forward on the projects? What I mean by that is it would appear to me that this one is head and shoulders above a lot of the other areas that are getting attention. Is for 112th, for example, where there are no sidewalks. 34th, there are sidewalks. So does that weigh into, and you know, of course, with our scoring project that we'll be looking at later, but are those things that are considered as well?
Yeah, it's considered. I mean, we have attached sidewalks. We don't have detached sidewalks on the corridor. That would be our standard. And then we also, with this project, as I mentioned, we kind of need to look at what will happen with the Vic development. So there's going to be a lot more desire from people on the south side of 34th Street to access, you know, the residential and the commercial and just the facilities that will be a part of the Vic development. So considering that increasing amount of just mobility that will be occurring in that area too is something that we need to consider beyond just kind of what's existing out there.
Perfect.
Does that help answer your question?
It does. No, exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Jennifer, quick question about the different kinds of surfaces. It's like there's 3 different ones. What are the differences?
Oh, for the pavement treatment?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'll try to do this. I don't know if Ryan is still here. I don't think he is. So I'll try. So the microsurfacing treatment that would happen on Southeast 34th Street is more of a liquid. So it's a just kind of like a sealant almost that goes down. It'll still give you kind of a smooth surface, but it's more of a kind of protective sealant on a street. So Southeast 34th was done, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. At some point it had been done. So it's a more of a treatment for a street that's still in fairly good condition, but will give it longer life and more protection. So it kind of is a sealant that goes down into maybe some of the cracks and wear and provides better protection for it. The chip seal that was on, okay, so 112th is an asphalt overlay. And so that's actually coming in and putting in a layer of just actual asphalt on the street. And I don't think in this case, well, I mean, typically, or a lot of the times, well, they would do that. So they'll grind out maybe like an inch of the existing asphalt. So they'll grind out that layer of asphalt and then put a new kind of like inch of asphalt down. Sometimes they'll go down to the base, but that's more of like in a reconstruction scenario, like what happened on Columbia, where the asphalt is just in such bad shape that they'll go down to the rock base and put full new asphalt. But in this case, they would just kind of mill down about an inch of the existing asphalt and put a new asphalt layer down. And then, let's see, a rubber chip seal, what they're looking at doing on 4th Plain. So a chip seal is kind of where they use a certain size of rock. It's fairly small size of rock. I can't tell you what like the size of it is, but they put down like a surface of kind of like a liquefied surface, like an oil type surface. They put the chip seal down, the rock surface, and then they come back through and almost do kind of like a microsurfing, like a sealant layer over the top of that, if that makes sense. Hopefully, I think I got that right.
Yeah, thank you. So that's indicated when it's in what kind of shape? Is that?
I think the chip seal is, well, Oh, see, so Chris Snyder was going to come to next month's meeting. So he oversees the pavement management program and he can explain this a lot better than I can.
That's fine. I can wait. I think you did a great job.
But I think,
and not to intervene here, but if I may just add that on the City of Vancouver Public Works page on the pavement surfacing, it does list all the different types of pavement preservation and gives a real good breakdown. I'm actually looking at it right now. So there is
oh, does it?
that information is, yeah, the chip seal is a layer of sprayed emulsified asphalt, a layer of new rock. It extends the life of the road by 7 to 10 years. It's a new sealed surface and is at a fraction of the cost of the standard asphalt overlay. I mean, all that information is there for you. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I should have just pulled that up. But it sounds like I did pretty good.
You did excellent, actually. I just let you know that there are other resources here, you know, for all. And it's really great because I didn't know this, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different types of sealants. So it's
yeah,
really
there's quite a few. Yeah, could you copy that link and put it in the chat? If so other people could maybe potentially copy that and pull that out, that'd be great.
I can do that.
Do we have a chat, Jennifer? Where's the chat? I don't see a chat. I actually had some housekeeping thing I wanted to let staff know, and I could not let you know.
Up at the top.
Well, Loretta already put it into the chat.
Oh, I see it now. Okay.
Good, I'm operating on 2 different computers. I was trying to figure out how to do that quickly.
Okay, well, actually, I'd rather tell you than put it in the chat because everyone should know, so I'll tell you in a little bit.
Okay, so I don't want to keep you guys too long. So the last street we have is Fort Vancouver Way. So Fort Vancouver Way, oh, this is another one. Yeah, Cape Seal. So this one's, well, I won't try to explain that one. I'll just say go to the website. I think it's kind of the same thing where it's like the rock and then the sealant on top. But maybe you guys could tell me different if you're on that page and you can see. So Fort Vancouver Way is anticipated to be done in 2023. If you could go to the next slide. And so some context for Fort Vancouver Way. So on the left image, it's kind of hard to see, but it's basically Clark College's master plan. And if you've ever driven through a college campus or around a college campus, you know that it's just kind of constant back and forth from students walking to different buildings. And so we've had issues with people walking on the corridor, walking across the corridor to access Clark College facilities, and have had some people hit while walking on the corridor. And so we know there's been concerns raised by some officials at the college about that concern for people walking and having safe access across Fort Vancouver Way. That was part of the reason with the bus rapid transit project. When C-Tran came through, they added some additional signals and upgraded some of the signals for people crossing Fort Vancouver Way in the corridor. And then as part of, additionally as part of the BRT development, on this right-hand side was this Great Street concept that we developed as part of that process, in hopes of kind of envisioning what we would like to see as a full build out of the street, if that was possible. If we were, initially we thought that there could be the opportunity for more capital improvements on Fort Vancouver Way as part of the fourth plane BRT project. And so if that was the case, what we thought at the time, we wanted to make sure we had a good plan in place of what we would like to see the corridor be. And so it included, and you can see kind of a really small snippet of that where C-Tran did some improvements, where you've got like detached sidewalks, you've got the nice median, the planted median. One thing we kind of didn't get through that process was an improved bike facility on the corridor. As you know, there's quite a bit of on-street parking on the corridor, and the bikes facility is pretty substandard. It can be 4 feet in some places, right up against parked cars. So that's another kind of concern, ongoing concern with the facility on the corridor. And then again, if the new bridge project continues to consider the very large parking complex for high capacity transit just on that west side of the campus, how that could potentially impact traffic on Fort Vancouver Way. It could have some significant increases on traffic for the corridor. And then we did a road lane repurposing of Fort Vancouver Way south of Mill Plain. So that actually used to be 2 lanes down to kind of the little traffic circle that's down there between Mill Plain and the, Evergreen. That used to be 2 lanes in each direction, and actually as part of a paving project, we reduced that down to 1 lane in each direction and improved the bike facilities through there. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of a context, you know, kind of the information that we know about the project. So ADT, again, much lower on the corridor than some of the other ones. The posted speed is 25. It's 2 lanes in each direction. Some areas have a center turn lane, some areas have a median. We've seen some collisions on the corridor, kind of similar to 34th Street, but more for people walking and then somebody who was biking on the corridor. And then we have had a fatality on the corridor. And then, like I mentioned, there's several mid-block pedestrian crossings that we've done. We've got some substandard bicycle facilities on the corridor, detached and attached sidewalks in some of the areas as well. Next slide, please. Public outreach, similar to the other projects, although Clark College is a key stakeholder on this one. Fourth Plane Forward, similar to Fourth Plane Project, C-Tran with BRT, Clark County Public Health, they have their campus there as well as the VA. And then the IBRP project, the bridge replacement project. Next slide, please. So for this one, it's, as I mentioned, looking at repurposing a travel lane. Do we want to, is there interest from C-Tran about doing a dedicated BRT lane? Do we want to look at improving the bike facilities on the corridor? So those are kind of the 2 main ones that we might be considering for a roadway repurposing on the corridor, how parking interacts with that as well. And then safety improvements, are there any other improvements that we could make through roadway restriping or other kind of low cost improvements on the corridor to improve safety and mobility? And with that, I'll stop if there's any questions for Fort Vancouver Way. Okay, next slide, please, Julie. So just to go over some of the next steps. We are kind of here in the kind of project opportunity. So this is a slide that was developed that I believe we've shared with you and also City Council through other kind of conversations that kind of shows the policy level that was talked about earlier with the comp plan, the transportation system plan component of that, the strategic plan, and then we also have sub-area plans and corridor plans that were done that kind of feed into the capital facilities plan, the transportation improvement program. And then we're into that kind of circled area for these projects about looking for project opportunities that come through the TIP, and what is in the TIP could be just the general pavement management program. So it's kind of a line item in the TIP. All of the projects aren't specified in the TIP because that changes pretty frequently, and it's not really kind of confirmed, and it's based on a lot of you know, when the bids come in and things can change. So there's just a lot of fluidity to the pavement management program. So that's why specific projects aren't listed out in the TIP. And then also if there's projects identified in the TIP, like if, you know, we had Main Street in there at one point to add bicycle facilities on Main Street, which would have been part of a pavement management project. I believe at one time the bike facilities for South 34th Street might have been in the TIP. So again, that synergy of looking at the TIP and seeing if there's other safety improvements that are identified in the TIP that we could potentially incorporate into these paving projects. And so it's really looking at the opportunities that we have through the pavement management program at this time, and then we'll be doing the analysis and outreach to see if there's improvements that we could be making to the corridors in partnership with the pavement management projects. Next slide, please. And this is just an outline of the project process. So if you saw the presentation that we gave to City Council or you watched the workshop, City Council is really interesting in establishing, as well as the city manager, in establishing a project chartering process. So we had a couple slides in there where we talked about kind of these touch points that we'd have with City Council, and they had some very good feedback for us about how to better incorporate the TMC and also shared their concerns about making sure that the TMC was well incorporated into this chartering process with them. And the challenges with that is that we've got these project timelines that we have to meet for the pavement management program, these touch points that we have to meet with City Council for the project charting process, and making sure that we're able to come to you and present these projects and get your feedback and have you provide, advise City Council on some of these projects. Well, I mean, I should say all of these projects. And so what I tried to show in this slide, but what didn't show up, I don't think, is so the orange points, the little orange stars with the circles are touch points that the TMC would have. And then the little kind of purple stars, the circles, are touch points that City Council would have. So we've got kind of these major components of project need and goals. And that's what we went to City Council with a couple weeks ago and are coming to you today with. We've got existing conditions, so we'll come back to you specifically with very kind of more in-depth and detailed information about existing conditions. So the traffic analysis, kind of the results of that and the findings of that, we'll bring that to you. And then kind of the initial public outreach that we've started as part of the process. And then we'll come back to you and to council with kind of the design alternatives, and what that really will feed into that is the traffic analysis that's done and the public outreach process. And so we'll have those design alternatives or design concepts. We'll take those to City Council and to you, get your feedbacks on those. Should we move forward with X, Y, and Z, design concepts? Should we keep some of them out, go out to public outreach again, and then kind of finalize the design concepts that we would then move into actually like design and engineering plans. So this would just provide design concepts as an outcome of these processes that we would have for these projects, not full design engineering plans. I just wanted to be clear about that. That would come in a different phase in working with the pavement management group of how to move these design concepts into full kind of design plans. Next slide, please. So just again to go through that, we were at City Council. We'll be going back to them with a resolution, kind of going over the discussion that we had with them a couple weeks ago, making sure that they were essentially okay with moving forward of this roadway repurposing concept for all the projects, and then the concept of looking at safety improvements on the corridor. So just very high level kind of ways to analyze the corridor or look at the corridors, and then also just kind of the higher level goals is really all that we'll be kind of asking for City Council in this resolution. And then we are setting up an on-call kind of contract process within transportation planning. So Public Works has had an on-call contract for a really long time that gives them a lot of flexibility. It's a list of consultants that they can choose from for different projects. We're just super close to getting that set up, and so that'll give us the ability to select consultants to help us with some of these complete streets projects. And then we'll start the safety analysis and traffic analysis on the corridor for Fourth Plane. That's already started. So we've already started. We've got a consultant underway. They are already starting on the traffic analysis. So we'll be coming back soon. I believe I had on the advanced agenda coming back to you in October with the initial kind of outcomes of the traffic analysis for the Fourth Plane project and more background on that project. And then again, we'll be returning to council for those kind of steps identified in that timeline for the chartering process. And we don't have dates yet set for those because I'm going out on unexpected medical leave on Friday. We have had to delay, and then with Anna Dearman leaving the city, unfortunately, it was her last week last week. We don't have the capacity to move those resolutions quick enough along as we had wanted to. So the resolutions will be delayed a little bit until I get back from medical leave, and hopefully we can find somebody to fill Anna's position to help along with that process as well. So it's going to be, the resolution is going to be a little bit delayed, but we're going to try to keep moving forward on these other touch points and try to meet some of the deadlines for the pavement management program if possible. But there is some potential flexibility there. Next slide. I think that was the last one, right? Yep. Any questions or thoughts on that? I know that's a lot of information to go through.
Commissioner Jackson, I was curious, will you be up or someone updating us on when public, what kind of public outreach is happening once it ends?
Yeah, so when we come to you with kind of the initial kind of traffic, results of the traffic analysis, we'll talk with you about public outreach and continue to talk with you about public outreach through all those touch points. And then if we have like a milestone, like if we're having, maybe roundtables or, a survey that goes out or an open house or something like that, we'll let the TMC know about those opportunities as well.
Ken Williams here. If I understood this right, the pavement plan puts up a list of streets, for 2023 or whatever, and then you or somebody then kind of correlates that to a list of things in the TIP and says, aha, here's a match. Southeast 34th figures on both lists, and therefore is a go? Or did I misunderstand that process of plucking out particular paving projects that are worthy of attention?
It's both, and I should have clarified. So it's not only the transportation improvement program, but it's also the transportation system plan. So we have, even though it's outdated, we still have the map from the transportation system plan and a capital facilities list that is part of our current comprehensive plan that identifies existing needs in the biking and walking network. And so we look at that as an opportunity. So like Southeast 34th Street is an identified need in the transportation system plan, but isn't in the transportation improvement program. So it's both that we actually look at. We look at the TIP and see if there's a project identified within the TIP, but then we also look at the higher level transportation system plan, because not everything, because we don't know, necessarily what streets are going to be done. So it's hard to know, because the transportation improvement program is it's a programmatic tool and it changes every year potentially. So it's hard to align the two, if that makes sense. Like it's hard to align the TIP and the pavement management program. So again, that's why it's just identified as a program in the TIP and not all the specified projects, because there's so much fluidity between the pavement management program and then even sometimes the TIP, if that.
That could be interesting to almost try to articulate those two things in a better way. Perhaps you even pull up a pavement. Oh, geez, this is scheduled for 2029. Why don't we do it for 2027 or something? I guess what kind of brought that to mind is I was a little surprised. I was out crossing Falk Road on Nicholson, where it's the SR 500 off ramp, and that is daunting as a pedestrian. And I thought this would have been a beautiful opportunity to have, restriped, repainted, to make that crossing a heck of a lot safer. But I guess we get to wait another 7 years or before the next chip seal to do a do-over or something.
Well, there's still opportunities, and unfortunately, we missed an opportunity. So they're also doing work on St. James this year, and it just it comes down to really staff capacity and the ability, because there's so much. We're thankful that the community supported the street funding strategy. And there's just so much money available and great improvements that are being done as part of the pavement management program. But from the planning side, it's very difficult in terms of capacity to, to be able to work on all of the projects.
Oh, I understood.
And so this wasn't all of the projects that we submitted to City Council, but these were kind of the priorities as they evaluated the different projects that we had identified opportunities for, considering their values of safety, equity, and climate change, and then also considering staff capacity. These were the 4 projects that were selected, but there were a couple others that weren't. So that's the hard part, is, as you're saying, seeing those opportunities that we could make some improvements go by. But even though there is a moratorium essentially on streets when they do a resurfacing treatment, if it's something small or maybe a couple years out, there is that opportunity potentially to have that discussion about ways that we can make those improvements. It's just it's hard. There's so much going on. It's just hard to work on everything.
Commissioner Williams, this is Ryan again. Jennifer's right. We've been grabbing these as they come up on our pavement management radar, and we work feverishly to try to figure out how to address them. What I'm hoping for is, going forward, we can look more holistically at the entire city arterial network and start to think about, okay, when this project comes up on our radar screen, either for reconstruction or paving, what would we like to do, or what would we think, what would we propose? And maybe just start trying to get 4, 5, 6 years out ahead of those, so that we're not scrambling so quickly. And so there's some conversations we need to have. We need to get some staff, some vacancies filled. But I think the preferred direction going forward is that we come at this a little more safe and sane, per se.
Thank you, Ryan. And I was also, because you had a really good point, Ken, about how it's challenging to be looking at these different kind of documents. And so one of the outcomes that we want with the transportation system plan is a more integrated and more cohesive system of plans. So the biking and walking master plan that was done as part of the previous TSP was kind of a standalone document, and a lot of the modes were kind of done in silos. And so we are doing this update more integrated, and we had identified and will be getting kind of a complete streets system map out of the process. So kind of a layered map that shows these opportunities and these high priorities and these focus areas for complete streets. And so a better way, like you're saying, to kind of look at as we move forward into the future, when these opportunities come up, a better better guideline, or just a better map, better guidance for us.
Thank you.
Any other questions at all?
Commissioner Hardy. You're on mute.
Yeah. I have a question. The bus system that uses these transportation routes, especially over here on the east side, like on 192nd and 164th, is that all C-Tran?
Yes.
And how does the bus system in C-Tran affect these roadways? Because I happen to have spent a good part of the weekend holding up a sign for a candidate. So I was on 192nd in Mill Plain, and 164th in Mill Plain, and 164th and 34th. And I saw a lot of buses go by, and those long, big buses, not small ones. And there was maybe 1 or 2 people in all those buses. I mean, is that because of COVID that we're not getting people to ride the buses? And then what's the impact of buses on these streets and people walking on these streets?
So we've been working closely with C-Tran kind of through the pandemic and getting information from them in terms of ridership. So they have, just like other transit agencies nationwide, have seen a decrease in some of their the ridership on some of their routes. They've actually seen increase in some of the other routes. So it just kind of depends, and really started to show those areas of the city that really depend on transit. And so they continue to kind of look at those numbers and evaluate their routes. One of the most kind of impacted routes they had, obviously, was, well, not, but the routes that they had, like the express routes, the commuter routes going into Portland. And so as people start to go back to work and they're going out more, the patterns have changed a little bit, But yeah, there has been some decrease in ridership on some of the routes. And so it just depends on the route and kind of the time of day when you're seeing the buses moving
But
through.
I was on these streets in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening, and even when I'm driving around, and I've ridden the bus on like Milpain, there's not that many people riding the buses. And we're trying to build these multimodal communities over here with Vic, and then I guess it's being proposed that they may change the zoning in the section 30, the HP, and if that's going to be high density housing, what's the impact for getting people around on the bus systems on these roads? It's just a question. I know we don't have the answer now, but.
Yeah, so again, C-Tran is a close partner, and part of these conversations that we're having with developers as we're looking at, making improvements like the VIC or doing changes to zoning, they are part of the conversations. And as part of the transportation system plan, so while C-Tran, they maintain and operate the transit system in the city of Vancouver and then areas of Clark County and some of the other outlying cities. As part of the transportation system plan, we'll be doing what's called an enhanced transit corridor analysis. So we'll be looking at ways that we could potentially make improvements to the city street system to support and improve transit reliability and efficiency and access. And then as we're seeing with a lot of people with collisions, people walking and biking, safety to providing better access and improving safety to access transit to ensure for those people that maybe transit's their only option, that they have safe and reliable and accessible route options for them.
Moving forward, are we going to see some of these large buses? I mean, is C-Tran looking at a different kind of bus to be moving around in these areas when we don't have as many people using the bus system? Versus just long buses with no one in them?
Yeah, I can't speak to that directly. I mean, they have the longer articulated buses that they have on the 4th Plain Vine route, and they're going to be looking at doing something similar for the Mill Plain bus rapid transit route. And the 64-foot buses are kind of their, I believe it's 64, is like their standard sized bus. They have proposed some changes to more of like a like an on-demand service in some of the kind of the outlying areas and some like kind of inner areas. So it's more a smaller bus that they would be using for those types of routes. So that's something that you would have to bring up and discuss with C-Tran, because I can't speak to it specifically.
Thank you.
Sure.
This is Commissioner Ramos. Jennifer, if I can still ask a question about if the group has some kind of policy or promise on prioritizing the community voices that are in the neighborhoods that are going to be impacted by this. So I'm thinking like on the 4th Lane corridor, you may get 50 responses versus like an overwhelming response from the broader community requesting to not take away the travel lanes. How do you approach that in prioritizing the communities that live there and their ideas?
So that's something that we're definitely going to work towards on this project, and what will be really helpful, in particular with the 4th Plain project and then also the transportation system plan, is that the same consultant is working on both projects. And so we'll be able to build off of the public outreach process that we have for both the transportation system plan and also the 4th Plain project, because we want to be respectful. We know that for a lot of these community-based organizations and for a lot of the people that live in these areas, it can be very difficult for them to give up time out of their days to participate in these processes. And so actually tonight there was a roundtable for the transportation system plan that was going on at the same time that specifically was focusing on some of those key stakeholders in the 4th Plain area and some of those communities that we typically don't hear from in these processes. And so that is really a core focus of the 4th Plain project, the TSP, and then the other projects as well, and that will hopefully lend a more equitable voice to those people and to how they use the system and how they see the system and how they would like the system to function. And it's just a way to have that conversation and balance out what we're hearing from different communities and different users. So it'll be a conversation with the design concepts and with the community and with you and with City Council about kind of what the priorities are, what the core values are for the results of these projects. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. And just as the public transit representative on this commission, I'd also follow up. I know that I brought up the climate action strategy, and I know that Vancouver hasn't adopted one, but that we would prioritize alternatives to single vehicles. And so that it's encouraging that you're exploring those, and I guess just finding ways to prioritize that. Even if buses only have 2 people on them, I think the way that we get others on it is by making them more reliable and frequent.
So I'd like to add to that. I mean, I live, Commissioner Hardy, I live on the corridor right there along 164th and Mill Plain and 34th, and I'm actually on the neighborhood association there as well. So talk to both of those. For the stakeholder side of that, we really, my neighborhood meetings, we have maybe 3 or 4 people show up on a regular basis, but we have an email at our distribution list that we're able to get opinion from each of our as many members that really wish to chime in on that. So I can only speak for our neighborhood, but we're really trying to be more efficient and effective on bringing our voice, both sides of the arguments to that. But to speak to what you said on the bus ridership, I have some very close friends that are special needs. They rely on that bus transportation to their jobs, to their to their groceries, to everything. And it is sad to see that the ridership is down, but it's a very, very, very necessary service, in my opinion. And whatever we can do to help, as Eduardo said, anything that we can do to help make that more reliable and more attractive to the riders is going to be to our benefit in the long run. Go ahead, Teresa, Commissioner Hardy.
I hope I didn't come across as I don't think buses are important. I think they're extremely important. It was just concerning to me to see these long buses and so few people riding them. So what can we do? Can we make more efficient, more, buses that are electric, smaller, travel more often? Put up more places where people can stand in weather conditions. I think, but the bus system is extremely important.
Sure. No, I apologize. I didn't mean to misunderstand that. No, I like, did anybody else have any questions just to follow up there with Jennifer before we start looking to move this along in our agenda tonight? I think, Jennifer, thank you for that presentation. That was very helpful. Speaking on my behalf, I'm very excited. Ryan, as always, very helpful and very, very clear direction, I guess, in what we can expect to be a part of moving forward. Jen Williamson, are you still here? Thank you for, again, always for your support. I apologize. I don't know who Loretta is. I keep getting stuff over here in the comments from Loretta. Who's Loretta? Thank you, Loretta.
I'll introduce her. I'm still here. Loretta is our public involvement officer for Public Works. And so she is a really important resource for all of you. When we have projects, she's helping us together with planning and then the citywide communications team on outreach to community members and helping us put together presentations to connect with neighborhood groups and things like that. So Loretta's a wealth of knowledge and she'll be available to you all in the future. And anyway, yes, thank you for having me. It was great to hear the questions and the input along the way. I think it's really exciting that this group is picking up steam and getting off the ground and getting going. And I know many of you have been anxious to do this good work, so we're really happy to have you supporting the community with your volunteering.
And thank you again for giving us the support and the method in which we are able to move forward with this. I don't want to walk away from our agenda without providing a community, or a commission communication. I think a lot of us have had an opportunity to chime in on tonight's meeting. I think that some of the issues that have been addressed throughout the last couple of weeks or the last couple of months in the meetings, as far as a clear focus moving forward, I hope some of you are able to at least feel the same way I do about some kind of forward momentum and what we can do and tangible results that we can see coming forward to us as a group. With that said, I would like to open it up if there's any commission members that have anything that they would like to speak to this week.
One quick thing. Yes, Commissioner Payne, I put it in the chat. I just wanted to let everyone know, and Julie's on it, but I have two completely separate people that wanted to speak tonight. So we have no one, and I think the reason is because something's broken. One person was trying to get in by phone and the other one was trying to get in using the resource page that they're told to go to. So so we do, hopefully, things will be fine. I think that Julie's got it. So thank you, Julie. But, they'll be able to come back next month, but just wanted to let you know that.
And I appreciate that. Again, that was something that Loretta was able to really give us some good direction on the, the communication of the chat line over here for, which was helpful. I do agree that even I had a couple, technical issues getting those signed on tonight as well. So, if you happen to speak to these people, encourage them maybe just to try to sign on, make sure, that they're able to access the platform, I believe, before the meeting actually starts, and to at least make sure that their system is cooperating with our system and that they're, reaching the right location. Just a recommendation. I'm certainly going to try that next week before the meeting as well. So, did anybody else have anything that they'd like to add this evening? We're not going to get out of here that easy, are we?
I hope everything goes well, Jennifer.
Yes, Jennifer, our thoughts are definitely with you. Julie, I want to say you've done an amazing job. Thank you for hosting this and getting us up and running, providing the information to us. Again, I'm just excited that we can see some tangible direction, and I look forward to seeing everybody next month. Well, most everybody, Jennifer. Anything else? Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 6:30 or 6:28. And we will see, the next meeting is scheduled for, I saw this earlier, hold on, September 7th. So we will see everybody back here on September 7th.
All right,
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jennifer.